Hello, welcome back to our last session where we are going to be talking about romance. Mjolo.
For life.
Mjolo for life.
Yeah.
Once again, I'm Delphine Mazarura, and with me today is...
Bongai Munatsi.
So, I love the fact that Wonga is a clinical psychologist. It sounds so fancy, like, it's like, ooh. Anyway, Wonga is going to be helping us to unpack relationships. A lot of mental health issues are on the rise because of relationships nowadays. And we take it for granted. I think it's always been there, but I think these are issues that have not been addressed, in terms of relationships, in terms of marriages, in terms of what relationships can actually do to us, for better or worse,
Till death do us part.
Yes, till death do us part. I remember someone saying, you turned me into the monster that I am today. And you were saying you don't like the person that I've become, after they'd been married for a very long time. So, Wongai, please help us to unpack this Mjolo and mental health. The Mjolo move.
Yeah.
It's like ever since the song was released and you're feeling Mjolo, it feels like, Mjolo has been the thing that has been, on the trend. What's going on with relationships?
Yeah, I think, Def, it's really great that we get a chance to talk about relationships because it's one of those things if, you've got a family member or parents actually that, teach you about what it means to relate.
Right.
And what relationships are about, then you're profoundly blessed, or lucky,
That's true.
because a lot of the times people are just expected to kind of, get through these milestones. Figure it out. At some point you start dating. At some point you meet someone. At some point, you choose that this person is my, my lifetime partner. You get married and all of those kind of things in various forms, right? But there isn't much that people are actually, sort of taught about relating and what good relationships look like.
Okay.
So you find that a lot of the times it's a sink or swim kind of thing.
Right.
But relationships are a part of us because we are not islands. We've been created in a way that we want to relate, we want to be loved, we want to be accepted, we want to have that person who's my person, who I go to when stuff isn't working well, the wind beneath my wings, and all of those and all of those kind of things, and so it's also then one of those places where we get the greatest stress. So it becomes one of those big stressors, in people's lives, especially when things are not going well, and when we think we found the one, and then they turn out, to not be the one, and then, is there actually the one, or can anybody be the one? Will Prince Charming come? Can I kiss a frog, and then will they turn into a handsome prince? That's going to kind of, fulfill all my dreams, and we live happily ever after. So it's all of these issues that make Mjolo and relationships, a huge trigger for mental illness or mental health conditions. Right. And so you find stress, burnout, depression, anxiety, trauma, and last time we were talking about suicide, especially when relationships break up, when people divorce or are separated, there's a higher risk for suicide in those moments. It's because of these kind of things around relationships.
Right.
So where I think it would be good to start would be around, how do you find the one in the first place?
All right.
And a lot of the times people don't realize that, the one is actually a part of a programming, right?
Okay.
So the way I want you to think about this, or how I can explain this, Steph, is that, all of us, have got a program that runs our lives.
Okay.
We actually just don't know it, but there's a programming that is running our lives. So if you think about it, you've got a smartphone, and lots of people have got smartphones. Smartphones run on apps. Apps are codes that, are written, right, by a programmer. If you're not really a tech person, you really don't care about that, that code, because you don't understand it. All you want is for the app to function. You want it to send messages. You want to, do all the stuff you want to do with the phone, right, or the app. But what's making it work is actually the coding, the program that the programmer put in it. And so what makes us work as human beings actually is the programming that our parents put in our lives in the first sort of years of our lives, the formative years, first 5 years of our lives. So those formative years are very critical because that's when we met our first relationship. And our first relationship is mom and dad. And mom and dad wrote a code about what relating is, whether they were present or they were absent, whether they showed affection or didn't show affection, whether they liked each other, didn't like each other, a single parent, whatever the case may be, absent parent, whatever the case may be, there was a program that was written. So you find that when we grow up, we say, he's not my type. Right? But where did the type come from? Right? You actually meet people and you say, this one's not my type. And then you say, this is my type. The type is actually in the programming. Wow. So you find that a lot of people think that they are awake, deaf, and they're making decisions about their relationships. Oh, I like the tall, dark, and handsome. Oh, I like this and that. Wow. But actually what's happening is the program is working behind the scenes, much like that coding on your smartphone, to make you do things without you realizing what's actually happening. So this is why you walk into a room and you say, I trust this person, I don't trust them. You make a snap judgment. It's the programming that's actually working. So when you say a type and you choose a certain person and you say, this one is my person and this one is the type, the one, what's actually happened is it's the program. But if the program had problems in it, and a lot of the times they do, because mom and dad, the first relationship, were not perfect. What happens is the program is just repeating what was in the first relationship, which is why you find people starting to say, Gerudo Jandiramba.
All right.
Because there's a repetitive cycle. A pattern. I always meet people who are abusive or who hit me. It starts well and then at some point they just turn out, they change.
Can I just come in there?
Yeah.
I've got a niece, now that you say that.
Yeah.
I say to her, why are you staying in an abusive relationship?
Yeah.
And then she said, Auntie, it's familiar. Because I grew up and dad was very abusive.
Yeah.
It's a part of me.
Yeah.
So automatically I am drawn to abusive people.
Yeah.
And because dad is passive aggressive, he can be very nice, then just turn into the monster that he is. That's how the boyfriends start.
Yeah.
So they start being very nice, very charming, pursuing her. And then when she says yes, they start being aggressive and they start, demeaning her. They start all these behaviors. And I said to her, but why are you staying?
Yeah.
She says, I don't know any better. My heart broke.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the programming.
Okay.
Right? And it keeps on making her meet, because like I said, she's asleep, but she thinks she's awake. It's like she's actually on autopilot. And she might actually decide to say, oh, that guy was short. And no, let me find maybe a guy who's taller. Or that guy was light. Let me find one who's darker.
Yeah.
Let me find somebody who's... So you can change people and you can say, no, this one is better because it's John. And you can say, oh, this one's that. But the programming is actually pushing you or making you choose the same person, and then you keep on having that repetitive cycle and that repetitive pattern. It's actually because we have unfinished business with the first relationship, which is mom and dad, and then we are trying to fix mom and dad through this relationship that we have with the partners. And the more they treat us in that particular way, the more it reinforces within us and to us that I'm the common denominator here. I tried it with John, the same result. I tried it with Peter, Simba, and the same result, which means there's something wrong with me. When in actual fact, you are dating the same person. And so you're getting the same result. They might have different names, different faces. They might look different, sound different, appear different. But if you actually then track it, you'll see it starts the same way. It goes through the same phases, and then it happens. So it's the same with, let's say, mom or dad was an absent parent, or he died, or they were separated. You find somebody will start being involved with, people, long distance relationships, people that are not, emotionally available. They actually don't know what it means to have somebody who's present. When they have somebody who's close, they're like, no, this is just way too much. You're suffocating me. He's in my face, because they're used to that absence. Okay. And that's their programming. That's their template. And so you find that, people will then start struggling with relationships. And worse when we are now married. Yes. Because the same issues start coming up. The same problems I had with my parents, I have with my wife or my husband. And the same life I lived when I was a child, I'm living when I'm an adult. And then it's seeming to reinforce in my mind that I can never be happy, that I can I can never be loved, I can never be accepted.
Right.
But where the problem is that we're on autopilot, we're allowing a program to run and to function and to sort of draw us into this, cycle of bad things that we're struggling to sort of get out of. Right?
Now, okay, we've spoken about all these issues, that come with relationships, but how do we fix it?
Yeah.
How do we make the right decisions even though our programming is, it's dysfunctional?
Yeah.
How do we then save ourselves from some of these mental health issues that are coming because of relationships? A heartbreak is very serious. Heartbreaks are very serious, and they start like even at high school, where kids start to experience heartbreak, and then they keep on dating in high school, and by the time they're adults, they now have a certain perception about relationships and about how life is moving, or so how do we deal with it?
So Def, I think the mantra and what we've always been saying throughout the month and throughout all the segments that we have had is that you can get help.
Okay.
And people can say, why do I need to go and talk to a psychologist about my relationship, and why do I need couples therapy, why do we need counseling for relationships? But it's one of those very big stressors where people can actually just hurt themselves and hurt each other simply because their programmings or their programs are not aligning, or they're feeding into each other, and their pathologies are making things worse for both of them, but without actually realizing it. So people can love each other, but because of the things, the junk in the trunk, the baggage, the things that they're carrying, their programming, they can end up destroying each other, destroying themselves, destroying, something that could otherwise, be beautiful.
And we've seen it.
And we've seen it.
We've seen people saying they were such a good couple.
Yes.
Because they connected, but because of the different functionalities of their systems, they clash at some point, and then it stops working, and then people draw apart, and then before you know it, the marriage has failed.
Or even traumas that feed into each
That's
other.
True.
And so we bond because of a trauma. And then, by the time we are together, we all have needs that the other cannot meet because of those traumas. And so we are saying, it's important to talk about relationships. It's important to actually find out what your programming is. It's important to actually look at, the downline and look at, the intergenerational failures.
That's true.
Because if there has been serial divorce in my family, if people haven't been able to maintain relationships, and I haven't been able to maintain relationships, and I've struggled in that area, or the marriages around me are struggling, or the relationships around me are struggling, it might be a time for us to ask why. Because a lot of the times we shield this and we say, oh, he just wasn't mine, or he just didn't love me enough, or she didn't see this or see that, or it wasn't the right time, and we make these excuses. But it might actually be very important for us to actually find help. Talk to a psychologist, know what your program is, because it's not easy to see mom and dad. A lot of the times when you ask people, how was your childhood? People will say, my childhood was fine. It was normal. I grew up just like everybody else. And because parents are sacred cows, it's very difficult for you to then say, no, my mom was actually abusive, And now that I'm married to an abusive wife, I don't understand why I connected with this person. I don't understand why I stay when I'm being devalued, when I'm being abused, when I'm being treated like I am less than human, or I am, But because we are wanting to say everything is rosy, parents are perfect, but they're not. And this is also not to say that, it's a parent bashing kind of way of looking at things, but we are saying that gavira kava kumashuriro. Who you are right now is as a result of all of the experiences that you've had in your life, whether you know them or not, remember them or not. And remember, when we started right in session 1, we were talking about things that are predisposed in the womb.
Yes.
And so there are lots of things, neural connections that your mind was making about so many things that you actually are not aware of consciously, but that the program is kind of moving in so many ways. So you get people saying, akapusa murumo ya ambo ndirovi. Your idea of love is being beaten.
It's true.
Your idea of being loved is being handled in a particular way. And if you don't see that and somebody gives you love in a different way, you miss it.
It's true.
And you can actually say, they don't love me because they don't talk to me. They don't love me because they don't listen. They don't love me. But they're actually showing you love in other different ways. But your trauma is bleeding into the relationship, and you're self-sabotaging, and you're sometimes losing things that you should have and love that you should have because of mental illness or mental health challenges that are unidentified and where you haven't gotten help.
As you were talking, I'm just thinking there are people who are logging out right now. They're signing out because they feel like I was coming to understand about relationships and how I can make my relationship better. And there are people who are on the verge of a divorce and they were looking for someone to give them a trigger. To say, it's time to get divorced or leave that guy or leave that girl or, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But as you were talking, I really feel like what you were saying is there is hope for relationships.
Yes, definitely.
If you are able to sit with someone who is qualified to talk about relationships, because it's not just two bodies coming together. There's a whole lot of psychology. Is it called psychology?
Yeah.
There's a whole lot of neural pathways that work to become the person that you are. And sometimes the wiring is not fitting into the person that you choose, and then we can rewire and make you see the problem. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, we are actually saying there is hope, dear, for relationships. The most important thing is you have to understand yourself. And you have to understand, and the other person that you're with also has to understand themselves and to understand who they are. So you might be attracted to somebody, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're good for you.
Right.
But if you think that everybody that you're attracted to is good for you, you are stuck then in those repetitive cycles, especially if that program is wrong. So there is hope. But the hope then comes with you being awake and you actually making a conscious decision about who you're with, rather than being drawn by a program or a repetitive cycle that's coming from your traumas, how you were raised, the things that happened to you, the experiences that have made your program, and that has made you accept or be attracted to certain things. And so that being awake and that level of awareness is what is important. And that's what we are saying about relationships, to say there's a lot we can talk about relationships. And I hope in February, when we are doing, Valentine's month, we can, unpack a lot more around relationships and things that, that need to be done. But before you quit on it, before you say, I will never find love or I never find anybody, speak to a psychologist.
Yes.
Talk to them about your life and how far, where you've come. You might not remember all the stuff that happened to you in childhood, but the way your life is manifesting and is right now, whether it's relationship, work, all around, can actually be a mirror of what was put in the program right when you began, right? So if you are continuously being rejected, if you're continuously being abused physically, emotionally, sexually, all of those factors, if you're consistently getting somebody who are not emotionally available, if you're consistently getting people that are fly by nights and don't want to commit, all of those kind of things, I'm just giving examples. It's telling you that there is a problem in the programming. And that programming needs to be looked at and needs to be understood, and there's hope for you and things can get better.
Wow, thank you. I mean, our time is gone, but I feel like, we can unpack this further. So we're going to ask you to just send us your questions. We're not going to write your name, but I think we need a session, a question and answer session, where we look at your questions and we actually give you solutions. Please stay with us, and thank you for viewing. Thank you, Wongai.
Thank you, Dave. It's always good chatting with you.
Oh, it was amazing. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.